Hello everyone, my name is Mushanga, student at Mbarara High School, and with me is Mutonjere, Ahurira Arnold, and Ali Blessing Tugome.
We expect a good round and we expect a win. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ajuka Janrian and I'm from Sacred Heart. On my right is Cherabo Christabel, on my left Kabahinda Maureen, and then Sentham Isaac. We are here for the Crossfire debate Western edition.
We are facing off Mbarara High School on the affirmative with a resolution. This house believes that the creative industry should prioritize profit over social responsibility. So we are on the negative, Mbarara High School is on the affirmative. So we expect fair judgment and an overall play out of the resolution.
House rules. Each speaker has 5 minutes. The first and last minutes are protected. The judge will ring a bell to signal the protected time. The bell will ring continuously after 5 minutes.
This house believes that the creative industry should prioritize profit over social responsibility, right? Begin with, what is this debate about? First of all, social responsibility refers to the obligation of an individual or an entity to then act in ways that benefit society, right? But then secondly, what does the creative industry look like? This is an industry that includes things like design, music, publishing, architecture, film, or even video, right? But then let's get deeper into this debate, right? What does it then seek to look at? It then looks at the idea of prioritization. Now, what does prioritization look like? Prioritization then looks like the sort of emphasis on a particular idea over the other. It does not include any sort of exclusion. So on basic frame out, we don't expect these guys to come and say things like, we're going to exclude this sort of social responsibility and things like that. But then furthermore, we also need them to give us exclusive benefits for why they think this sort of social responsibility should be prioritized. Let's delve into the debate. To begin with, context. What does priority look like? On our side, we then think that it looks like the emphasis on educating individuals or people on how best they can maximize their talents to then get benefits in the creative industry, right? This looks like prioritizing talents that these individuals have to then gain some sort of profits or get some sort of, leverage for them to compete with other people in that particular industry. But what do we think is the impact of individuals then prioritizing social benefit, right? Prioritizing social benefit only undermines individuals' ability to maximize profits from this industry. This means individuals then do not get to use their profits to then maximize the sort of profits that they get. Even though we think that team negative will come and say individuals still get profit, we think individuals do not maximize that particular opportunity, right? And that becomes very, very detrimental because this sort of industry runs on things like getting funds to produce much better things that individuals then find appealing to them, right? But then secondly, we then think that profits cater for market. That is to say, the industry itself makes surveys in what entertains individuals and will give things to individuals to appeal to them or to give them this sort of need, right? But then what that means is that even in analysis, this sort of industry provides a lot of profits in the GDP of the world. That is to show you that even according to the UN report of trade and development, it shows that the creative industry grew from 1.4 trillion US dollars to 2.78 trillion US dollars in 2023 alone. That shows you a 4.29% increment. What does already show you? It shows you that this sort of creative industry has a very big impact on the sort of funds that then happen or that then are existent in the world today. But again, shows us the creative industry alone generates a lot of GDP in the world, right? Secondly, on what the creative industry needs. We then think to a larger extent, the creative industry needs or heavily relies on skill, which will be sustained in that particular industry. By making individuals then prioritize social benefits, you then undermine their ability to then compete with other individuals to maintain that particular industry, which means the creative industry on its own will become existent at a much lower extent, which is very detrimental for that particular industry on its own. But then furthermore, what do we think benefits better? We think the only way you're going to get the best benefits out of the creative industry is if then you create this sort of competition between individuals to then delve themselves beyond what just social responsibility looks like. We then think that prioritization does not mean we are excluding social responsibility, because individuals can still come out and probably make a song about a pandemic if there is need for sensitization and things like that. We think those are also benefits that exist in our side, but we think it's better to prioritize money because individuals need this sort of competition. Thank you.
Hano, so what do we get from team proposition? Team proposition come and define to us prioritization as putting something before the other, but meaning not neglecting the other. But there is also this perspective where prioritization can mean putting something on top, even at the expense of the other. So what does team proposition have for us? They have things like maximizing profit. So in their world, they focus on maximizing profit over social responsibility. That means they neglect the contribution of social responsibility to what they are talking about. So they forget that in the resolution today talks about creative industry prioritizing profit over social responsibility. So here we look at a world where we want profit, both from either prioritizing profit or from social responsibility. So this is what they forget. They forget that currently there has been maximizing of profits on the expense of social responsibility. Take a look at what has happened. We have seen things like exploitation of artists. These artists in the music industry have been exploited. Why? Because they are putting pressure on maximizing the industry. What team proposition does not understand in this case is that it's an industry that is aiming at getting profit. Thereafter, there is a producer, there are the people helping to produce, and there is the consumer. What they don't understand is that the consumer is actually the person that is sustaining the creative industry. So in case you serve a bad Coca-Cola soda to the industry and the people get sick, then we get low consumption from the people. But failure to prioritize social responsibility has then brought things like indecency, which has been in the music, for example, that you have seen in the creative industry, in the pornographic art that has been portrayed. So what do we get from the youth? We get people, they're now going to things like LGBTQ, people going into things like homosexuality, going into other things. So that has brought about gradual laziness. Why? People's minds have then been from what is being got from the creative industry. So now what the creative industry has come out to produce, because why? They are focusing on maximizing profit. They don't care about the kind of product they are going to give to the consumers. They don't care how that product is going to affect the consumers. So the indecency, the pornography, the every kind of bad thing that they are putting out there is then now affecting the public. So we get laziness from the public, which is actually now then affecting Uganda's economy. In the long run, the world of maximizing profit is then going to actually be affected. They maximize the profit they'll use is to then solve other problems. What they also do not get in this case is that without social responsibility, without the prioritization of social responsibility, we get a degradation in what they're talking about. We get things like culture appropriation, where then culture is going to then be deteriorated, because as we see, to maximize profit, they are going to need to do things like bringing in the outside music, like adopting the Western culture. Why? Because that's what the public wants. It's what the public wants to get. It's what will make them a lot of money. But we see deterioration in the culture of Uganda. And remember, culture contributes to a larger extent to the tourism of Uganda. And they're forgetting that tourism is the backbone of Uganda. So then what do we see? What they're suggesting, what then they are saying brings a burden to Uganda's economy. It brings then now Uganda coming in to fix what has come out of them prioritizing profit, which is then not the case in this case. We are saying prioritize social responsibility, because what are we aiming at? A long-term sustainability.
This is the High School Crossfire. We'll be back in a minute. This is the High School Crossfire. Welcome back.
Hano, understand one thing on responses. Firstly, why I think they lose out on these people are probably the ones who are directly deteriorating culture is because on the first metric, one, creative industry is not subjective. that means that if someone wants to watch entertainment that looks like this, I feel that there's a lot of public information that exists, and people choose this kind of entertainment on an informed choice. I don't think that becomes a metric on the creative industry, but what people can then buy into. I don't think you can credit them on that argument. That's the first response. But even if you don't believe in that, I think people feed into this kind of music. That is why they keep on supporting the creative industry, and that is why it supports the GDP, and that is why people most likely go and subscribe to things like R&B, things like expressive art, and all those kinds of things. Those kinds of responses show that on those grounds, if creative industries are there to exist, they are giving people a variety to choose from, and that variety doesn't limit them or makes it subjective to what they're actually going to do. But secondly, I think just on premise, what I think their argument still cannot run in this case is what this industry is to these people that are creative. I think it is what they rely on as jobs, what they rely on as passion. If that premise exists, then I think they are reliable to get things like profit. Why they should prioritize things like profit is what you get from Ray's speech. One, they need that money to sustain themselves in the industry. Two, to pay things like managers, to pay things like the albums they're going to make, and to pay things like concerts they're going to make. I think that's analysis they don't get back from their side. And how much that lack of profit doesn't sustain them. But let's tell you why social responsibility can't be the priority. Firstly, favoring them on things like competition. I don't think that in any case, even if you're debating the current context, if everyone is immoral, you're going to be the moral kind of Jesus Christ in this story, and you're going to probably beat that competition by being more social responsible or not rather profit oriented. I think in that case, you make the creative industry, you make yourself lose out on that kind of ground. I think the creative industry, for it to contribute to the GDP more, it ought to run on things like beating our competition and allowing sustainability. But lastly, I think there is direct gain if people are front for things like prioritization of profit. One, because they get direct profits that they can use to supply to things that they actually want to put in place. But lastly, on why I think social responsibility can't be priority is because it doesn't sustain the industry. If it doesn't sustain the industry, we don't get the profits from the industry. We don't get people to stay in that industry. We get lots of people who are creative but don't join the industry on those grounds.
Speaker.
I don't think you can credit them on that kind of case. But before I go into argumentation, yes.
Do you believe that when we are maximizing profit in these industries, is it a short-term gain or a long-term gain?
Profits are continuous. What does that mean? You get it from Ray's speech. If markets exist, for you to get profits from those markets, you have to be profit oriented. What does that mean? You supply to the people who are there, and that context allows you to survive in that country, so it becomes a long-term kind of thing. But anyway, I think the creative industry, on terms of argumentation, is a survival mechanism that exists to these people. What does that mean? It ought to encourage. These people are working on their passions. There are lots of people in Africa who are told not to sing, who are told not to draw, because people feel that it is not credible enough. I think to a larger extent, that means that the input they put in, the risk they make, needs to have direct impact, like things like profit. I don't think to that extent we can still take things like share responsibility as a priority. But lastly, there's a lot of things like different risk preferences, different change in society, and people sometimes really don't care about things like creative industry. That is why people have to go to things like profit, because people are not going to care how much you're going to be contributing to the society. Societies keep on changing, so you won't see the kind of impact you're trying to put it, because they have a lot of diverse preferences in that kind of set. But lastly, on the choice to create then survive, I think when they create more of this, they exist more. Thank you.
There is enough for every man, but not enough to satisfy every man's greed. What's the last statement we get from the proposers? They say that they don't care about what people are to consume, and they don't care about which products they are producing for their people. But what they care about is only profit maximization. And what do they say about our side? They only argue saying that we are not sustainable, that prioritizing social responsibility is not sustainable. But in the first place, we see, look, in economics, where a businessman or an economic man starts a business, they only aim at profit maximization. And what do? In this case, they do anything possible to maximize their profits. How? They will use cheap raw materials, they will use cheap labor, they will use anything cheap to produce the unquality products for them to satisfy their need for high profits. But in this case, we also believe that, of course, creative industry is aimed at making profits. Every man starts a business, every man starts an economy with an aim of making profits. But in this case, what do these profits when maximized bring on the table? In this case, we find that there is too much greed where that they need to make products that do not satisfy and actually are toxic and are unhealthy to consume by the people in the country. For example, they even talked about that it creates a lot of GDP in the country, and but for this is for a very small time. When the creative industry shiftly goes with profit maximization, yes, the GDP will rise instantly and to be high, but to some level and instantly it will fall. Why? Because the businessmen are flexible. They will look at profits where they have failed and leave, because they will produce products, and when they produce and realize that the people are not ignorant and they have realized that their products are not quality, they are going to leave them, and this will lead to a fall in the GDP, which is irreversible. They are talking about competition. We believe in economics that competition is highly unhealthy, where we see that there is duplication of products. We see that people will have to produce poor quality products in this guise of producing the quality ones to satisfy what they call profit greed. In this case, but we also look at what are the people consuming. Is what the people consuming healthy? Is what the people taking in healthy? Look, last time when the government and the prime minister of Uganda had to ban the musicians from the music industry after producing the immoral music, for example, in Kudia, that was produced by Lily Puzzle. That means that Uganda is actually caring that this one should not be on the market, because when you produce music that is going to deteriorate culture and also deteriorate the moral ethics of the community, it is not consumable to the community. So when it is found that it is toxic, it is banned, and in that case we see a loss of employment. We also come up with the company failure of the producers when they realize that the companies are actually producing low quality products. They will be flexible enough to say, now that these ones are not supporting us anymore, we are going for more products. In that case, we see that there is a neglection of the high quality services and products that should have been provided to the people but are less profitable. So when you aim at maximizing, we see that you're not actually like caring about what people should take in. You're not caring about what people should what people love. All you need is maximize profits. In this case, we think it is leading to deterioration of the economy of Uganda. And that's why we leave with them with a question that would they prioritize profit over people's lives? Would they prioritize making more profits to the life of the people that are consuming the products? And in that case, I make my point clear.
This is the High School Crossfire. We'll be back in a minute. This is the High School Crossfire. Welcome back.
Clarity, it had affirmative speech and panel. Me and you still do not know what social responsibility from side negative looks like. It's third speech, and we still do not know why we should choose their definition. That their first negator clearly tells us that the only reason as to why they think that their priority description is way better is because there is another description that says that priority looks like having something at the expense of the other. We don't get a reason to contest the already existing definition that already exists. So we actually go with that. Secondly, without a clear description of what social responsibility looks like, we do not see what aside affirmative and what reason as panel we should then prioritize things like social responsibility over things like maybe earning money, maybe being able to get some sort of profit that can be able to self-sustain. Let's look into what actually comes in. Firstly, they kind of do not describe to us why they think things like indecency, why they think things like exploitation are solved by the social responsibility that of course they have not described to us. So till this point, we are still wondering the fantasy of social responsibility solving a problem that we actually also do not have a clear reason as to why they are interlinked together and why they are being solved together. More so, we feel that teams ought not to create problems they cannot solve. If they are not able to present to us social structure in the responsibility that enable this to actually solve things like indecency, solve things like that, we don't think they actually can be able to win out. But more so, we think it's very uncharitable for side negative to lower the debate to things like music only, where things like that exist. I mean, Ray does a good debate as bringing in and showing you that things like architecture, things like design, things like music, acting, a broad aspect of things like football, netball, are all entertainment, a creative industry where people are employing their skills to create new things. We don't get engagement on such levels. We don't get any substantial matter on why things like that have things like exploitation industry and stuff like that. But more so, on the comparison of exploitation and indecency, understand these creative industries, when they feel like they do not have an influence, the next thing they go to is to try to actually amass a population of followers who like them for what what they are in an indecent matter. That is to say, the only way side negative the only thing side negative does is that
Feel
it
I
pushes them to
speaker.
the level that they actually want to use desperate means
Feel
to become
I.
famous. And before you know it, they're actually producing things that are indecent and stuff like that. I think you can only get it from that side. But secondly, it is a priority resolution. Most so, since we don't get anything to counter, our definition is what we shall go with. Firstly, we don't think that we are actually eliminating anything like social responsibility. We think for
Feel
it
I
to work,
speaker.
there's some sort of funding that is needed. More so, we don't get a rebuttal as why the funding in itself is a bad thing. What we get is that this funding actually does things like exploitation. But understand, the reason these people do this is to be able to get money. And the only reason they can care about the societies they're in, maybe build a school, maybe set up a hospital, do charity, maybe things like that, of course, describing what they should have done, is only if they have enough money to go to that extent, is if they have money to produce albums, rank the charts, and also have a charity auction so that they can be able to feel good about what they are doing. I don't think the creative industry in itself can be able to go to that. But secondly, it's an actor resolution. That is to say, we have an actor at the center of this. The creative industry, what is better for them to buy into? Something where they get profit and as a priority, where they can be able to go back to things like maybe social responsibility, or things where they prioritize social responsibility, but without an impact because the funding they have is not able to buy pads for girls in Kalmoja enough because they cannot literally produce a second album in their studio or be able to afford jerseys for their football match in Kacheka Stadium. That in itself already shows you that there's a lot of inefficiency of these people to carry out the social responsibility as they want. I think on those grounds they cannot be able to win. But even the comparison of sustainability, I think for these people to continuously exist and help out, they only need to be able to have the funding to do so, and that will win the debate. Thank you.
Well, you can take a horse to the well, but you cannot force it to drink. So in today's debate, where we are, the team of farmers failed to realize that we come here and give them examples of social responsibilities. For example, we tell you that, right from my first speaker, there has been banning of toxic music in the country, and that is an example of social inequality. But as the third speaker, you are coming here and then you are objecting, you are saying we have not been able to say that. So I'm going to start with debating the clash points. First of all, we clash on competition brought about by maximizing of profit and competition brought about by social responsibility. So here we look at countries, Oborali, from Asian countries that have try to maintain their culture. Like you are told, when you maintain culture, we are improving things like dualism, right from my first speaker. But when you are living the culture, you are competing with countries like America, which are already ahead of you. Competing with them, you will have no future. So that makes their point valid, and that makes our side win in that debate. They bring a point of GDP. GDP generated from maximizing profit. As you are told from my second speaker, it will be a short-term GDP because we are looking at people at indecence being brought about. Indecence being brought about, it is making you lose public trust. Losing public trust is going to make someone get done with what you are doing, and then the profit will be generated, but it will be a short term. Yet for us, we are going to be generated something long term because we are looking at public trust. We are being trusted by the public. Then we also look at profit versus profit maximization. We don't tell you that we are going to leave profit. We know for every business you must earn a profit, but we are getting the profit, but also sustaining lives of the people. So we are not becoming malicious like the team of farmers who want to maximize their profits, even at the cost of people's lives. We come here and say to them a question: would you prefer people's life over profit maximization? Because according to what they are saying, it's as if they are malicious and they are willing to kill people just to get the profits. So according to us, we are going to get the profit, but we are going to get a considerable profit that is going to also be saving the people. So that means we are favoring the people and we are also favoring the industry. So we also look at cultural heritage versus change in culture. What is better? They tell us they are going to adopt to the culture of the Western culture so that they can be able to compete with those people. But I'm telling you that competition isn't coming in because we are competing with people who already have better products compared to you. But the cultural heritage, you are competing on your own grounds. This is whereby they bring to you examples like the cultural sites in the country. Those are attracting more people. As my first speaker tells you, tourism is a backbone. Being a backbone, that means it is going to be helping us develop some amount that is going to be helping the country. So on comparing the world, in our world, we look at a world where culture is being protected, where we are looking at morality maintenance, and we are looking at failure to exploit the artist. So that means we shall be able to even get profit, get a long-term increase in GDP, and also be able to develop the country slowly by slowly without losing out in the industry. But on their side, we look at a side where they are aiming to drain all the profits or to maximize profits, but for a short term. And after that term, these people are going to lag in the development brought about by the industry, simply because the public won't be trusting them, and then the industry will soon fall short of money, and then you will find the industry will soon fall short of profits, and then you will find it isn't helping. So I beg to rest my case.
This is the High School Crossfire. We'll be back in a minute. This is the High School Crossfire. Welcome back.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Well, do you believe that we have culture in Uganda?
We do.
Do you believe that culture supports the creative industry?
It does.
Do you believe that profit maximization can cripple culture in Uganda?
No, it can't.
Do you believe that industries maximize profit
Yeah, they do.
over the life of the consumers?
No, because the consumers are the
Thank you.
market.
Are profits being gained even when the consumers have unhealthy consumption from the industry?
They don't gain profit.
Thank you so much. I get. In a world with profit maximization and in a world with social responsibility, which world is sustainable?
Firstly, it's a value debate. But secondly, in a world of profit maximization, both things are catered for, because you can't support your community if you're broke.
Thank you so much. In an industry, do we need consumers?
We do.
And can there be the existence of the creative industry without the public to consume its products?
No, it can't.
Do you believe that there is unhealthy output in profit maximization?
No, that doesn't occur because people are
It is
consuming.
okay, I get. Do you believe that unhealthy consumption due to profit maximization cripples the life of the consumers?
No,
To some extent, does culture contribute to the creative industry?
it does.
Thank you so much. Did your third speaker state that we are going to be holding social responsibility even when we are maximizing profit?
Yeah, the only way you can be able.
Thank you. So, panel, what do we have from this cross-examination? I expected Team Farmers to tell us that we have culture in Uganda. Yes, indeed, they know that we have it. And they had to also inform us that culture supports the creative industry. Thank you for that. They gave it to us. But they left out in mind when I asked them, do you believe that profit maximization can cripple the culture in Uganda? It can. Why? This was answered by the question, do you believe that unhealthy consumption, do you believe that the industries are going to maximize profit even at the expense of the consumers? What does this bring to us on table? This means that even in profit maximization, people are caring about what they are going to earn in profits, not they are prioritizing this over the life of the consumers in the industry. So this means that the industry is maximizing profit. They are even maximizing them over the life of the consumers. And then we ask them, are profits being gained even when the consumers have unhealthy consumption from the industry? What are we seeing this? My speakers gave us an example whereby the people gaining the profits are being affected by the unhealthy consumption just because they want to grab those profits. And what do we see in this? The youth are generating bad vices from this. Why? We are seeing dirty music, dirty art in the industry. So why? Because these people are just caring about their profit gains, but not caring about the social people. And then we ask them, in a world with profit maximization and in a world with social responsibility, which world is sustainable? But no, you all see that a world with social responsibility is sustainable. Why is it sustainable? Me, deteriorating the culture in Uganda just to earn profits for this time round. And in the coming Uganda, we no longer have our culture. That means we have no sustainability in our economic growth. First of all, the people that are deteriorating the culture are going to be banned from the industry. This means that there is no economic growth in the state. And so they tell us that they're going to promote profit maximization.
What is social responsibility?
This is whereby you care about the output in the public.
Okay. So did we say that prioritization means emphasis, not exclusion?
You said it.
Great. So if competition exists, should we then compete?
You should compete where you fall.
Okay. How do you remain popular in the creative industry?
Pardon?
As an artist, as a person in the creative industry, how do you remain popular in order maybe to gain profits? Is the community, the society, always readily supportive to people in the creative sector?
Yes.
So don't people's choices impact the produce of the creative industry?
Not really.
Don't you think that the only way the creative industry thrives is by providing what people want?
No.
So do you suggest that people in the creative industry work to kill their market?
They do not.
Okay. With in existence of social responsibility, don't you think that there's also some profit making?
We have profit making in social responsibility.
I get that. So don't you think that most parents in Uganda would not be supportive of their children engaging themselves in things of the creative industry?
Yes.
Okay. Last question here. Don't you think that competition already exists and the only way we ought to compete is by providing what is already in that competition?
No.
No. Okay. Thank you so much. And why I think they lose out in this particular round of clash is firstly because of lack of exclusivity. Everything we talk about, you get from blessing speech that we still achieve it in our side. But firstly, then on competition in the creative industry, you get that firstly, with a lot of emphasis on community benefit, it limits then competition. Why? Because competition is already there in society, is already there in the creative industry. The only way to match this competition, also benefit from it, is by then providing what people want, what people already buy. By then you focusing on things like maybe culture and stuff, you're not going to be able to compete. Hence, you're not going to yield any money. At the end of the day, even the community does not benefit because you don't have money to support them, you don't have money to build orphanages, to maybe provide food, all those stuff. First, then secondly, on the exclusivity, we tell you that look here, the only way you're going to be able to benefit your community, the only way the society is going to benefit is if you maximize profits, if you have a lot of money to give them. But in their side, you only focus on giving them money, but you still even do not have it because you don't match competition that's already existent. Secondly, then people in the creative industry, Arnold tells you that this is it is their talent, it is their life. That's the only way they're going to be benefiting. We also think that the majority of the community does not support them. So at the end of the day, we think it is justified that they actually focus on maximizing profits so they benefit from it. Because even most of the people in the community do not support whatever they are doing. They think it's immoral and all that stuff. And then that brings us to third clash point of the debate, which is indecency and immorality. We think that the creative industry is actually very much based on choice and popularity and evolution. The only way artists then thrive in Uganda, the only way footballers thrive is by providing what people want to see, what people are demanding for. If people want things that are indecent, things that are immoral, maybe explicit actions, that's what you're going to be providing if you want to thrive in the industry. There's no way you can argue out immorality. Why? Because that's what people are demanding for. That's the only way you can thrive in. That's the only way the creative industry can then contribute to the GDP of Uganda. But then lastly is on evolution. Since it keeps on evolving, we think the only way to thrive there is by also evolving. Thank you so much. I rest my case.
Thank you so much. This was an interesting one. So, the resolution before us today was saying that this House believes that the creative industry should prioritize profit over social responsibility. For any person to win this resolution, they had to, first of all, understand what prioritize is, they had to understand what social responsibility is, and they had to understand what profit or profit maximization is, right? So at the end of the day, the person who won this debate was the person who was able to show me the reason as to why we should prioritize one over the other. Now, at the start of the debate, we had issues as to the definition of priority. One team is saying that priority does not mean exclusion of another. Then the other team was saying that priority means putting one at the expense of another. Personally, for me, I found that entire argument a bit irrelevant and not necessary for the debate. Now, moving on.
let me look at characterization. Let me begin from there. Team affirmative, you say that at the end of the day, the creative industry is not going to thrive if at the end of the day it is not making profits. It is an industry that is at a fast pace rising, and at the end of the day, it's bringing in profits to the GDP, and it's also doing what? It needs funding, right? Now, you define social responsibility as an obligation to act well in society, right? Then, team negative, you come up and your characterization of social responsibility. Personally, I do believe that in this debate you actually understand, you try to understand the mind of the drafter of this resolution a bit as to what social responsibility is. However, it is not entirely what it is. Also, the other thing is, Team Affirmative's burden of proof is explaining to us entirely what profit maximization is and entails. Your burden of proof is to show us what social responsibility is and expound it for us. By the fourth speaker's speech, we should not have question as to what is social responsibility. Do you understand what I'm saying? In your characterization of your first speaker's speech, you do not, your understanding of what social responsibility is implied from your first to the last. However, it is not explicitly stated. So you leave it to us and this team to assume what social responsibility is. At the end of the day, you people these ones were discussing disadvantages of Ngoni migration. You were discussing why Salim, what was that guy who, okay, why Said left Muscat for Zanzibar? You were on two different planes of what? Of social responsibility. Now, these people understood social responsibility as partly giving back to what? To the community, right? Now you come up and tell us what social responsibility is. You come up and tell us that at the end of the day, there are factors as to consumer protection, there are factors as to decency, morality, those things that matter in a society and how society holds itself. Then you talk about cultural appropriation, then you talk about sustainability and exploitation of artists. Now, Team Negative, they come up and they tell us about income generation for businesses. That is why we need what? To maximize our profits. They talk about sustainability and talk about other extraneous factors such as market appeal, subjectivity, and all that. Now, let me delve into what you talked about, sustainability. Sustainability, Team Affirmative is telling us that the creative industry is not to be able to sustain itself if at the end of the day it does not have the funds, if at the end of the day it's just depleting its funds in what? In giving back to the community. You see why I'm saying you're in different parts. You're talking about consumer protection, they're talking about what? Giving back to the community. Now, you come up and you tell us that that sustainability is not going to be present if at the end of the day people are making short-term profits. Now, for me personally, on that argument, you're all at the same pace because you all do not fully rebut it. Now, moving on, market appeal. They come up and they tell you, personally, Team Negative, affirmative. On another day, maybe you come up with a better argument. You cannot come up and outrightly say that things as to morality and decency do not matter since market appeal, because in a reasonable society, and as to your perimeters, Uganda, they really do matter, right? Now, moving on. Team Negative side, you talk about exploitation of artists. It was one of your first arguments. Team Negative, you do not engage them. Team Affirmative, you do not engage them on that. Also kind of goes back to you for your failure to do what? To characterize. But Team Negative, Team Affirmative, you have a burden of rebuttal, right? So you do not engage them on that. You engage them on indecency, morality, and then also cultural appropriation. They talk about cultural appropriation, that at the end of the day, if you had expounded on social responsibility, things as to culture, social experiments, and all those things would not be news. Do you understand? So at the end of the day, they tell you that cultural appropriation is one of the biggest problems that are affecting the creative industry right now. At the end of the day, a creative industry like Uganda is growing on what? On culture. At the end of the day, if this culture is being affected just because you're maximizing profits, we are not going to be able to what? To benefit. So personally, for me, when I look at the arguments, Team Affirmative, personally, in your argumentations, you do a very good role in what? In explaining to us your side of the story, right? However, you engaging on these people's side is what? Is minimal.
mostly because you do not expound on what? On your own arguments, because you people were debating on two different what? Planes. However, team affirmative, personally, team negative, on my side, I do believe that you satisfactorily answer as to why social responsibility should be prioritized over profit maximization on the premises that they fail to rebut most of your points of arguments. Have you understood what I'm saying? Now, I gave both of you 16 for style, 25 team affirmative, 27 team negative, 24 team affirmative, 24 team negative, totaling to 65 for team affirmative and 67 for team negative.
I just want to appeal to both sides. In a debate like this one, where we are having clashes on definitions, characterization of different keywords, both sides always adopt to what they use the even if argument. The even if argument hopes you not to contradict that maybe you are now engaging, like maybe you have now considered what they are saying, but you always come and use the even if argument. You always come and say, dear judges, even if we are to take the definition that such and such a team comes up with, still their case cannot stand because of A, B, C, D. But now, if you do not have the even if argument, you will either one, have a contradiction that maybe now one team is going to concede to the definition of the other team, or you are now going to have a totally different engagement from whatever we are talking about. Number two, for me, I always feel I'm a person who feels the rules of procedure supersede content analysis. I mainly look at what is the team meant to do. What did they expect of you? Yes, I'm also going to look at what you have been able to adduce, but have you been able to do what you are meant to do? In this case, this is what I could say. Personally, I'm a person who can fault you more. For example, if you're the person on side of a team where the opponents on the other side have come, and then for them, they've been able to characterize or contextualize a certain keyword, and they're telling you, for us, we are taking this to mean this. Now, why would you come and now instead also counterfeit to give a definition of a word that is not in contention, and you instead leave out the word that is in contention? Number two, I like the arguments that come from team negative. Team negative, when you talk about exploitation of artists that is happening this side, production issues, indecency, gradualness. Now, that's why they keep on asking you, so tell us, if we are having this, then for you in the social responsibility perspective, how are you going to be able to have a remedy to this? Don't just say that. Of course, it's not automatically by you saying that, you see, if you're prioritizing profits, we are going to have indecency. You see, if you prioritize profits, we are going to have gradualness. You see, if you're prioritizing profits, we are going to have exploitation of artists. So now come and tell us, now, for you, what does the social responsibility have to bring? If for them they are promoting indecency, for you, how are you going to promote decency? So don't just tell them what are the weaknesses that they have. So if those are the weaknesses they have, so for you, what is the strength you have? Yes, I really appreciate the fact that, for example, you were able maybe to engage them on the issue of maybe sustainability, but sustainability, it was a clash point. Because for them, they are saying, no, for us, even if we maximize profits, even if it is short term, as long as we are getting the profits and we are helping the people, they said, well and good. Also, team affirmative, on another day, the truth of the matter is, it's not that every time if we are talking about maximization of profits in the creative industry, it is about immorality. There is morality. You yourselves are done to say that we are going to give the people what they are demanding for. So is everyone now demanding for the immorality that is coming from team negative? Come and tell them no. The actual women that are also demanding for their morality. So literally now you consider whatever they are talking about. So now when you talk about social responsibility, at the end of the day, your arguments do not stand. So for me, the modes of procedure here did supersede the content analysis. And these are your marks. 15, I give both of you 15 for style. I give them 27 for strategy. I give you 26. I give them 26 for content. I give you 26, making a total of 68 for affirmative, making a total of 67 for negative. So to me, it is a win for team affirmative. Thank you.
Now, in a debate like this, you have to choose who you're debating for. This act of prioritizing something over something, who is it benefiting? Is it benefiting the creative industry? Is it benefiting the consumer? Is it benefiting the outside picture? Who is it benefiting? And that should, in turn, guide your arguments. Secondly, this is what I will classify as a parallel debate. So what other judges have already told you about, we have two houses debating social responsibility at two different spectrums. Now, my problem was that both houses did not try to engage each other on the other classification. But my bigger problem was with the negative team. Your first speaker challenged the definition of what prioritize is, but did not challenge what the definition of social responsibility is. From how you argued this case, it was more important for you to define social responsibility than prioritize. There was so little that you're going to deal with prioritize in terms of classification and definition of argumentation that you took your time to redefine what prioritization is and neglect social responsibility. That made then the parallel debate to that extent. And when there is a parallel debate, it means that, like I told you, different arguments were not engaged. So it goes back to team burdens. And if a team has a burden of proof and another has a burden of refutal and arguments are not engaged, one of the teams is always losing out on marks. So that costs the team that is at fault. So to some extent, the negative team, you are costed in my judgment because you primarily did not engage the type of social responsibility that was being debated by the affirmative team. Felt like arguments of cultural dilution, decency, and morality are important arguments that I don't think the affirmative team should have underlooked like it underlooked them. But at the end of the day, when you take them to the creative industry, they do not weigh. But also because there was a parallel debate, I felt that the affirmative team stood a chance to win this debate. These are the marks. 15 for both of you for style, 26 the affirmative team for strategy for reasons explained, and 23 to the negative team. 24 for content, 21 for content, making it 65 for the affirmative team, 59 for the negative team. It's a split decision, 2-1. Affirmative team wins the debate. Thank you.